Thank you for joining us today for another Abundant Living podcast. I'm your host, Bruce Oliver. You have our promise to do our best to make the next few minutes of your time well spent. Our special guest is prepared to share a blessing with you. So let's jump in and get started.
I am excited about having Dr. Burke with us today. She will speak on effective parenting for the 21st century. Patricia Burke is a licensed social worker with a doctorate in hypnotherapy. She has a counseling practice in Arlington, Texas, in which she assists individuals, couples, and families learn skills that help them function more effectively in their worlds. She remains active teaching social work at the University of Texas at Arlington and providing continuing education seminars at various locations. Dr. Burke has been extremely helpful in two of my projects. She has provided her skills in our spiritual gifts assessment website called healthychurchconcepts.com. She has also been a strategic partner in developing the MyIQSurvey.com assessment website. Dr. Burke, we're so glad to have you today. Are you there and ready for this interview?
I'm here and ready. Let's go.
Okay, awesome. So glad to have you today. And I'm sure that our visitors will learn a lot about parenting.
I hope so.
Discipline is a big problem for many parents. What is your advice on discipline? And you know the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Well, you know, the Bible also says in Proverbs 19:18, discipline children while there is still hope, rather than being so soft-hearted that you can't bear to hear them cry. So obviously we're not supposed to spoil them, but that sparing the rod and spoiling the child, I look at Proverbs 23. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. So shepherds aren't beating the sheep with the rod. They gently guide them and rescue them with their rod and their staff. So how parents can gently guide children is to give them choices and consequences. Like, for instance, you can simply say, stop throwing the ball in the house, or I will put it away until tomorrow, in a firm voice, so they know that you mean what you say, and then you have to enforce it and actually take the ball away if they continue to do it. But that's how to gently guide them. You give them the choice to correct their own behavior. That teaches them self-discipline. In Proverbs, you know, it says children are susceptible to follow folly, but discipline will drive them from it. So with kids who are older, school-age kids, you can actually sit them down and have them list the rules that they think they would like to follow. And actually what they're doing is they're listing the rules that you already have in effect. They don't realize this, but you're giving them this sense of control because no one likes to be controlled, including kids. So when you finish listing all the rules and everybody agrees to that, you go back up to number one and you start off saying, so what do you think your consequences should be for breaking this rule? And what I learned with my children is they're so much harder on themselves than I was going to be. So it's pretty funny that they are really creating their own rules and their own consequences, thinking they're in control, when really they're doing what was already being done in the household.
Wow, that's amazing.
The most important thing here is to be consistent with your enforcing of the consequences, because if you don't enforce them consistently, you let them get by with it here and there, they'll test you all the time because they don't know whether they're going to get by with it or not. But if you're consistent and they get a consequence when they do the wrong thing and make the wrong choices, that's going to make them stop testing you so much.
Well, I know parents have challenges when the kids test, that's for sure. Let me ask another question. How is a parent to deal with a child's anger? What if they throw temper tantrums?
Oh, most toddlers do, because you know what? They learned early on that crying gets them what they want. When they cried, you gave them milk, hugs, toys, pacifiers. So they learn to cry and pitch a fit when they're not getting what they want. So don't get uptight about it, just usually ignoring them when they're throwing a temper tantrum, maybe saying, if you tell me what you want, you'll get what you want. If you don't tell me, if you don't stop crying and tell me, I won't give you what you're wanting. And have you seen that YouTube video where the little boy, he looks like he's about a year and a half, he's throwing a temper tantrum, he's falling on the floor and crying and screaming, and the parent is videotaping it, and they walk out of the room. They're still taping, but it shows that he looks up. When he looks around and nobody's there, he stops. He gets up and he follows. He goes and finds the parent again. And then when he sees them, he falls out again and starts throwing a temper tantrum. And this goes on, and the parent is just laughing in the video. But they do stop whenever you ignore them.
Kids are smarter than we all think.
Oh, yes. So the problem is that I know most people have seen kids throw a tantrum in the store when the parent says no, they can't have that candy.
Yeah.
And the kid keeps screaming, and then the parent gives it to them. The kid just trains the parent instead of the parent training the child. Now they know. You've trained them. Keep yelling until I give you what you want.
Wow.
So we have to set rules for the behavior when you're angry. You cannot hurt others, you cannot hurt yourself, and you cannot hurt property. Now, you can beat up on your pillow or those balloons, or you can stand in the middle of the floor and stomp and just go, whatever you need to do, as long as it's not hurting people or things. And I found that Nerf balls, those little squeezy, like spongy toys, you can give them those and let them throw them as hard as they want to. It won't break anything. They just bounce right off.
Wow.
So instead of getting uptight when the kids are all out of sorts, just think about what Jesus said when he was being crucified. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then just use humor, because it really lightens things up.
Wow, that sounds like really good advice. I could have used that a long time ago. Well, let me ask this next question. Now, this one I have heard from other parents as a pastor, and there has to be a proper answer, and that's why we have you on the interview today. And here's a tough one. What if the child says things like, "I hate you"?
Oh, that's because they don't know how to express their thoughts and feelings appropriately. So you say it for them. Show them how to express themselves by saying, so you're angry at me for not letting you have these cookies right now. As soon as you finish your dinner, you can have some. Or you're angry at me for making you share your toy with your sister. Well, she had it first, and when she finishes playing with it, you can play with it then. And if they still continue to fuss and throw a fit, you can say, you can choose another toy to play with right now, or you can go sit in timeout. 6 minutes for a 6-year-old, 7 minutes for a 7-year-old. Something else that really bothers parents is that when teenagers roll their eyes.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to get bent out of shape about that. You can say, I see you don't want to do what I'm telling you to do. So when you finish doing your chore, you can go back to talking on your phone. Proverbs 3:13 says, happy is the man that gets understanding and wisdom. So they're happy because they're not stressing and reacting. Life is so much easier and more pleasant if you can just lighten up.
That is true. Absolutely. Thank you for that wonderful insight. How can a parent get a child to do chores?
Oh, the system that is so effective is the point system. I have heard the parents where they sit down and with their child and list all the things the child does, from get up in the morning, brush your teeth, get 10 points. Make your bed, get 5 points. Clean up after yourself after breakfast, get 5 points. All the way down to going to bed on time. And then you give them rewards at the end of the week if they've gotten enough points, say 75% of how many they could totally get. It builds their self-esteem, and when you have a very strong-willed child, it also helps you to see all the things they're doing right. It's right there clear, a little chart on the wall. It also gives you leverage to make them stop doing something. For instance, stop fighting with your brother or lose 25 points.
Whoa.
It's amazing. They usually don't stop the first time you tell them something, but when you say it the second time more firmly, they usually stop themselves because they know if you say it the third time, they've lost the points. But that builds their self-discipline.
What about paying kids for their chores with money? Is that looked down upon, or I guess that's called an allowance, or connecting it to chores?
That's controversial because, for one thing, people think that that's bribing a kid, and some kids get the idea that unless I'm going to get something for it, I'm not going to do anything. So you don't want to build that in. And you want to build in, we all live in this family, and we do the chores, and we reap the benefits. So you can have family night, fun night, things that you can do. When everybody's done with all their chores, we can watch a movie and get some pizza or something like that. So it's not such a good idea to get them, and some children are fine with that, and they don't get to that point where I won't do anything unless I get money for it. But other kids, they really do get to that point, and they say, what are you going to give me for it? I've had parents tell me that. So what are you going to give me for it? I'm not going to do it unless you give me something.
Well, is there like an age that you can actually teach your kids about money?
Yes, in the preteens, I think they're at the age where they are willing to bargain. I used to ask my daughter, do you want to earn some money, clean the house for $15? And she'd say, yeah. So that's one thing that you can do. You can offer them ways to make money when they're too young to actually work and make money.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense. Thanks for clearing all that up for me. How can a parent deal with a child with a bad attitude?
Oh, boy, believe it or not, we have a lot of power. If you change how you talk to them, it will change how they will respond. So you get less attitude. And the most important communication skill that I have ever learned that has worked really well for me is to give them an I statement. And this is not only for children. This works with everybody. So it has 4 parts. The first part is I feel. And make sure it's a feeling word: hurt, sad, frustrated, angry, disappointed. So I feel frustrated. The second part is when you do whatever behavior or don't do whatever behavior I'm not liking. So I feel frustrated when you don't clean your room. So it's got to be a behavior. The third part is because I feel comfortable when there's order in the house, and I like to feel comfortable in my own house when everything looks clean. And you can give them a second one and say, and I feel embarrassed whenever other people come in and see a mess and think I'm a lousy housekeeper. So then that's the last part, is when you tell them what you want, because we too often say what we don't want and never tell the kid what we do want, or our spouse or whoever. And so if you tell them what you want, you'll get more of what you want. So I need you to clean your room before dinner every night and just kind of straighten things up and put things away. I went from getting 20 to 30% of what I wanted to 70, 80% by using these I messages instead of yelling or criticizing the child or calling them names. How can you be such a slob? And it really changed my whole life, and it changed how much cooperation I was getting. It says in Proverbs, the tongue can bring healing or can crush the spirit. An apt reply, a timely word, gives joy to the sender and the receiver. The righteous think before they speak. Evil gushes from the mouths of fools. That's Proverbs 15. Okay. And we all know in Ephesians 6, fathers, don't anger your children. Instead, raise them in nurture and instruction of the Lord.
Well, that's wonderful wisdom there. The Bible does say a lot about how to raise your kids, doesn't it?
It really does.
Wow. Now, as a parent, some parents kind of have to deal with anger. They have anger. What do you recommend to the parents?
Well, it's very common to get frustrated with the children because they're always testing us and doing things that we weren't expecting. But, in Ecclesiastes 7, it talks about don't be quick-tempered, for anger is the friend of fools. So I learned to outrule emotions in parenting. It sounds crazy to people when I explain this, but I finally decided that there's no need for any emotions in parenting, because if the children do the right thing, they get rewards or privileges. If they do the wrong thing, you take away the privileges, or you give them consequences. So you can just say, you hit your sister, now you need to go sit in timeout for 5 minutes. And then you enforce it. Also, I used to ask myself, will this matter in 5 years? Normally the answer is no, I'm not even going to remember it. So why am I getting all bent out of shape and raising my blood pressure? So take some deep breaths and go do something fun. After you've given them the consequence, just walk away, go eat some ice cream, read a magazine. Because, we're teaching our children by setting this example. 1 Corinthians, it talks about evil communications corrupt good manners, yours and theirs. They're learning how to deal with anger from how you handle it. So think about the scripture, a soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. So calm yourself down, take some deep breaths, and get out of your emotions. In your mind, label what the child is doing, and then think of what is the appropriate I statement. It just really makes life a whole lot easier, and then you don't end up with high blood pressure.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. That's a really good point of view. Wow, a lot of parents need that's for sure. Here's a difficult subject. As a pastor, I get to have to deal with people in this area, and I want to know what the professional has to say about this. Okay, so here we go. What do parents need to know about parenting if they split up?
Oh, yes, that's a big one. I see that all the time in my private practice as well. So first of all, don't criticize or say bad things about the other parent. It's so hard not to do, but it's very destructive to the kids. The children will actually tell me they wish their parents would stop saying mean things about the other parent. And many parents use their children as pawns. They're trying to get back at the other parent by doing things that are aggravating to them. But you know how Leviticus says, don't seek revenge or bear grudges, and vengeance is God's. So don't use the child to find out about what's going on in the other person's life, like do they have a new girlfriend or boyfriend. Don't use the children to hurt the other parent sometimes they'll tell the child, you don't really have to go visit the other parent if you really don't want to. I've even had parents to say, you don't have to obey your mom. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Romans 14:13 says, put no stumbling block in another's way. I think that's a stumbling block for sure.
Yes.
So there's this book out there. There's this book out there called Mom's House, Dad's House. It's about treating parenting like a business arrangement. No emotions. You just try to have the same rules and consequences and discipline methods. You communicate about what's going on with the child and their behavior. If they're being disciplined, you've got to let the other person know so that we're on the same page and the discipline follows through on both ends to provide stability in the child's life. And then being flexible with the visitation schedule if both parents are reasonable. Sometimes one isn't, but there's so much more peace and cooperation if you can just be reasonable. And if one person wants to change the visitation to a different week to do something, allow that to happen. The children are seeing negotiating, or they're seeing you be angry and nasty towards each other, and they're learning how to treat other people. They have to remember that the child's best interests are what should be driving all of their decisions.
Yes, that's for sure. Would you mind if I ask you one more question? You got time for one more?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's look at another question. What if the school says my child has ADHD and needs medications?
Oh, that's a big one, too. I've heard that quite often, and many times parents don't want to put their children on medications. So first of all, I have a lot of people coming to me and asking me, can I diagnose the child and see if they have ADD or ADHD? You can actually do that yourself if you just Google ADHD and try to find out what the symptoms are, because it's listed right there on the net. The first thing, ADD is attention deficit disorder, where they're easily distracted. It's hard for them to focus because their mind keeps going everywhere. But when you add the H in it, ADD plus ADHD, which is attention deficit with hyperactivity disorder, that's when the kid is constantly squirming or fidgeting, running, climbing when it's not appropriate in that situation. They can't sit still unless they're really engrossed in like a video game. They are often on the go, like they're driven, like they have a motor going all the time. Some of them talk excessively, constantly, totally always talking, or they're impulsive. They blurt out answers and they can't wait their turn, and they interrupt and intrude on others. So those are some of the symptoms, the major symptoms, and if they have most of those, then they are that diagnosis. You don't really necessarily have to go to a doctor or a therapist to find that out. And then you can decide if you don't want to take them to a psychiatrist to get medications, you can take them, just go down to the drugstore and get Focus, or it's herbal medication, or Brain Smart for little children. It's a chewable, or even essential oils. There are many other things that you can do to deal with ADHD, but helping the child to get in touch with what is bringing their focus back to what's going on in their body. How do your feet feel? How do your clothes feel on your body? It brings them back and helps them to kind of bring their attention back inward, and so that it's not scattered everywhere out in the world.
Well, thank you for such an elaborate answer. We've discussed quite a few things on this call, like sparing the rod and spoil the child, and when a kid says, hey, I hate you, and how to deal with that, and what about a child's anger, and my goodness, we even talked about preteens and stuff, and parents' anger, and ADHD, and my gosh, we've covered quite a few items, and I'm sure this is going to be extremely helpful for those that have listened to this podcast today, and want to really thank you, Dr. Burke, for spending time with us. Now, I'm going to encourage the listeners to be sure to fill out the comment form. If you have a question, put it in the comment form, and we'll keep it internal, and we'll be sure to get it to Dr. Burke. And if you have a comment about how this podcast has encouraged you and helped you, please leave that as well, and we'll most likely post that for everybody to see, for them to get thinking about their concerns as parents. So we've had a wonderful time together today. Be looking forward to the next podcast at abundantlivingblog.com. Thank you for being with us today. God bless.
You're welcome.
It has been great to have you join us for today's podcast. Did you just receive a blessing? If so, will you provide us your comments and questions about today's subject? Check out our podcast schedule and join us for another special guest speaker soon. May God richly bless you.